Andrew's perspective. About a week had passed since the aliens first locked me up in here. An Earth week, that is. Naturally, being a different planet altogether, our chess's rotation time differed from that of Earth. Using what I could gather from native news broadcasts and weather reports, I was able to figure out that their days were separated into 8 segments, each about 2.5 hours long, resulting in days slightly shorter than Earth's, organized in groups of 8 into weeks known as estria. Twice a day, the guards would drop by to deliver various high-quality food items, including plump fruits that tasted like tart watermelon and boiled arthropods that resembled small lobsters with creepy-looking 3-pincer claws. The exorbitant serving sizes didn't suggest any plans to starve me, so instead I concluded to myself that 2 meals a day was most likely the norm for them. Besides my regular mealtimes, however, the natives kept little contact with me. At one point, they sent in some sort of doctor to run a few tests, but they weren't exactly the chatty sort either, leaving as soon as they obtained samples of my blood. For a lot of people, this kind of solitary confinement would be maddening, locked in a room with nobody save oneself to talk to. However, compared to what I had actually signed up for when going on this trip, even the sparsest of company was in fact a most decadent luxury. Initially, I had hoped Vavi might visit me during my stay, but with each passing day, the likelihood of such an occurrence seemed to grow lower and lower. I bet they're all watching me from some hidden camera, maybe trying to figure out my schedule before making a move. Having little more to pass the time here than television, I continued in my efforts to understand the native people through analysis of their media. It seemed that every time I tuned in to their news broadcast, more and more instances of that curious, slur-like word appeared, usually accompanied by various scenes of devastation and large numbers the meaning of which I could not decipher. Funnily enough, it wasn't until I switched to the cartoon channel that the pieces regarding that term's definition finally fell into place. In this particular episode, its familiar anthropomorphic, canid analog main character could be seen decked out in military uniform, manning the deck of a large warship and comically outfoxing an enemy boarding party with various Toon Force shenanigans. The setup itself screamed of war propaganda, and a closer look at the enemies revealed on their own uniforms a symbol I recognized from those news broadcastings, a feathered ring resembling 2 interlocked wings with an impractically ornate spear jutting diagonally through the round space between them. The cartoon concluded with some form of enlistment advertisement, followed by a series of what I presumed to be either the phone numbers or addresses of recruitment offices. Okay, so they're at war. Question is, who are those people they're fighting? Sudden groans of metallic complaint quickly drew my attention to the exposed dining room as the door marking my cell's entrance creaked open to reveal an unfamiliar face. Standing up and cautiously approaching the black-feathered stranger, I took in a deep breath and began to mentally steel myself for another round of educational charades. Then the stranger's mouth parted, and I could hardly believe what came out.
Hello there, Mr. Human. My name is Chot. I am the lead diplomat of this nation where you are now. Me and my friends wanted to have a word with you. Follow me.
Somehow, in the brief time I'd been locked up here, this alien had managed to learn my language. Though shocked at first by this revelation, eventually I offered a nod of compliance to the diplomat and began to follow him through the halls once more.
Speaking for Zintral's Prime Minister, I really am sorry for your confinement.
The alien continued in an apologetic tone.
You didn't tell us of your soon arrival, so we had to improvise the room while me and the other linguists took to learning your language.
Still somewhat dumbfounded by this absurd revelation, I could muster for this native only a single question as we turned the next corner in this labyrinthine complex. How the hell did you learn English so fast? For a moment, my question seemed to catch this Chot fellow off guard, as though it were somehow obvious. Looking over his shoulder at me with a curious squint, he replied,
What do you mean? I'm just using my memory of what that smart computer Miss Cleo said. A few days of memorizing words and sentence structure is enough for a simple talk, yes?
Most of my people spend months at least just getting the basics of a language down. Your kind must have some impeccable memory, I concluded, prompting from my guide another quizzical glance.
Interesting.
He continued, cocking his head curiously to the side, as though contemplating the meaning behind such disparity.
Maybe there is some advantage to forgetting things. I'm not a scientist, so I cannot know, but still it is interesting.
Politely shepherding me to another metal door and typing in its passcode, Chot wrapped his long claws around the handle, and with casual nonchalance, unbefitting our surroundings, held it open to gesture me into what looked like some description of a conference room. A few of the figures awaiting us inside were scientists I recognized from earlier. Everyone sat around that U-shaped presentation table, not dressed in a lab coat, was wearing either military uniform or formal-looking suits similar to my guides. What they all had in common, however, were eyes locked firmly onto me.
As you can see, Mr. Human, we saved you the most good spot.
Chot squinted, a friendly gesture from what I could gather. Then, approaching the final available side cushion, he sat and with the rest of his colleagues awaited my assumption of the central seat.
Come, we wish to speak.
Sweat slicked my palms like sunscreen as I stepped forth and plopped myself down crisscross onto the cushion chosen for me. Despite being an introvert, I had always enjoyed the attention of others. Telling jokes and giving speeches were much more natural to me than normal conversations. Even still, the crushing weight of responsibility placed upon me to represent in a positive light my entire species was unsettling at best and utterly crushing at worst. Taking in a deep breath of preparation, I decided to first begin a question of my own. Tugging down the neck of my shirt to unveil the stitches nestled there, I spoke. Would any of you care to explain your complimentary wake-up stabbing I received? Sat in the seat closest to my leftmost side, the familiar bandaged scientist averted his gaze shamefully before speaking.
Given you were frozen in that solution, we thought you had died in the long past. My name is Holven. I was ordered to perform the dissection. I'm sorry, very sorry. We didn't think you could still live.
Speaking of which,
Another scientist interrupted excitedly, their eyes inspecting with childlike wonder my alien features.
how did you survive being frozen for so long? Can all members of your species do that?
Swishing the question around in my head as one would with mouthwash, I carefully formulated my reply. That technology is what we call cryogenics. The ice is special and designed to perfectly preserve our bodies. If I hadn't had their attention prior to this, talking about technology definitely got it. Most humans couldn't survive cryogenic freezing for more than a few days. I had get genetic modifications for it to work this well.
You say genetic modification?
Another native replied in unison with the one who had initially proposed the question. I nodded affirmatively. Yes, I did.
Amazing. Perhaps you could teach us how.
Well, I sighed awkwardly, scratching the back of my neck as I contemplated how I could possibly help them with something so far outside my specialty. I understand the bare bones basics of it, but my ship's cryopod doubles as a medical bay and includes gene therapy tech last I checked. Perhaps I could help you reverse engineer it.
Clearly your kind are very more advanced than our own, Mr. Human.
An unfamiliar ambassador chirped excitedly.
We as the CAFEL hope you are willing to share some of your knowledge with us. We very much need it right now.
Detecting the bait set out before me, I decided now would be as good a time as any to ask another of my questions. I saw on your television that you folks are at war with someone. Who are they, and why are you fighting them? Sober silence fell over the presentation room as the previous atmosphere of wonder waned away to be replaced by one of solemn desperation. This time, it was one of the military officials who replied, speaking in his native language and allowing Chot to translate for him.
Providence.
The ambassador relayed in a grim tone matching the general.
We have been at war with them for about 27 years, your time. As for why we're fighting them, Laura Pita, get the projector, tape 65.
The other military officer, presumably a subordinate of the first, marched from the room and brought back with them an old-fashioned black-and-white movie projector. Signaling me over with a polite flap of her arm, Laura Pita flicked a few switches and inserted a rustic VCR-style tape, the kind of thing only found in museums back on Earth. Quickly stepping over the light switch, Holven clicked his claws together in discomfort before finally returning to the room, its natural state of darkness. Silver light sparkled out from the projector and onto the reflective board beside my speaker's chair, forging from its dim radiance a gruesome scene, the likes of which I would much rather have taken their word for. Mark Twain was often credited as saying, "History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes." Seeing the videos of Kafel civilians being gunned down by firing lines into mass graves they themselves had been forced to dig, I now understand the stanza upon which these people were perched.
Notice the longer tail length and straighter claws of those Providence soldiers?
Chott began, resuming his work to translate the general's words into a more comprehensible form.
They perceive them as marks of their divine right. Those who have those traits they wish to liberate from the chains of mortal government. The ones who don't end up in graves like that one.
"So this is what you're up against," I said bluntly, unable to conjure any emotion into my voice besides cold fury. "An army of genocidal theocrats?"
Yes,
he replied, his voice wavering slightly with something akin to fear.
and we've been on the losing end for some time now. All but 3 of our initial 10 allies are already long gone, and Zintril is running out of war supplies in their absence.
Cupping my chin thoughtfully between my thumb and pointer fingers, I sighed in contemplation before continuing. "And you want to use my tech to help end the war in your favor, right?"
Yes, human. We've held them off for years now, but if things keep going this way, it won't be long before our allied buffer states surrender. When we fall, democracy on this planet gets buried with us. Please, human, this may very well be our final bet.
I've never believed in destiny or anything of that sort, but hearing this plea nevertheless struck me with this situation's sheer unlikelihood. Maybe for Andrew Malix, this entire ordeal was the result of grand misfortune. For the Kafel people and Archesa, however, maybe my flight had gone just perfectly wrong.
Thank you for watching. Like, share and subscribe for more original content. New chapters and standalone stories uploaded weekly.